You're listening to Contesting Wrestling. Perhaps you're here because you also don't like wrestling. Statistically, based on the times we've asked our listeners about that, that's not the case. Statistically, I'm still the only person who doesn't care for wrestling who listens to this podcast, and I only listen to it because I'm doing it. I mean, I don't listen to it afterwards. I just hear the words that I and my compatriots say while we're recording them, so I don't even know if that really counts as listening in the same way. But what is not important is wrestling, and yet we're doing a podcast about it. That's what's difficult for me. My name is Evan Burke. If you've been with us the whole time, you know I've been on a journey that the last few episodes, since I've come back, it feels like I'm less on a journey and more just have arrived at a destination. I don't know what's going to change. I don't know where my opinion's going to go. I do know that while I'm not liking wrestling more as time goes on, I do have I'm a pleaser, right? This is an issue I have just in my personal life, is that I'll be like, oh, fucking Derek, Derek bothers me so much. What an asshole he. And then I'll see Derek and I'll be like, he's not so bad, I guess, right? Like, I'll just instantly, and so
like
that's the
Derek
problem.
From Hunter?
I just picked a name. No,
I haven't thought of that guy in a long time.
Yeah,
Always
by any chance he happens to hear this, I don't have any problems.
Give us a call.
I just picked a name.
Miss that dude.
Thanks. Now I feel bad. Now I feel like I was just talking shit about Derek from college. No, what's important? Damn it! Oh, this is what it is that I still get this thing where where we sit down and we have a podcast and we talk, and I just can't be like, I can't hate wrestling when I'm in the same Zoom meeting as you guys as I do in my everyday. Like, I could never, even though that's the whole point of this podcast, like, I could never truly express the things that I'm feeling in my brain. Like this morning when I was watching some wrestling and I was just like, ugh, why? And then we get here, and just the presence of my co-hosts, who I love and respect, just their presence, of course, makes me be like, well, obviously, let's dig into the nuance a little bit, and let's explore maybe why this is good, and I'll give it more of a chance. And that's just a dialectic that we have to live with. Doc.
Hi there. Yeah, and this is why we are continuing to do this show. This is why you have agreed to do the show, and this is why we have agreed to have you on less, Evan, and we really appreciate it when you come through. My name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been in professional wrestling about 13 years or so. I've done a little bit of everything. I've wrestled, I've done commentary, I've done ring announcing, I've done a variety of jobs backstage, and right now I'm doing this podcast, and I'm enjoying it very much. We watched some interesting stuff today, very different than the kind of stuff we've watched over the last few weeks, and we're going to get on into that, and I'm going to throw it on over to you, Ben Abelson. Professor, introduce yourself, please.
I am Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy and an interlocutor in the dialectic that Evan has to live with. And today we have a really, really big guest on the show. He's an independent wrestler. He has wrestled for House of Glory extensively. More recently, he's been wrestling for the SWF in New Jersey. He is the self-proclaimed SWF Cruiserweight Champion at the moment. It is, again, a really, really big deal that he is on this show. Brian Burgundy, welcome to the Contesting Wrestling Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I self-professed. I have to take issue with that first. It's not self-professed. I was guaranteed a cruiserweight title match. The champion never showed up. Therefore, I should automatically be declared the winner by forfeit and new champion. SWF has refused to recognize me as the official cruiserweight champion. It is an ongoing legal battle, but they're going to get what's coming to them. I have a statement that probably came out like 2 days before this podcast, but.
I just want to say before anybody else, I'm glad that somebody's finally making wrestling a legal issue. I'm just like, so much of the time I watch wrestling and I'm like, why is nobody calling the police? Like, I am for abolishing the police, but while we have them, like, somebody needs to get in there and stop all this from happening. So, I presume
we
that's
watched
what you
at least
mean.
one instance of that today, I think.
Right.
Absolutely.
One out of how many matches?
I have an entire talking point to go off that. First of all, we're cool with F-bombs here.
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Bomb
All
away.
right. I just want to say, Derek from Evans College, fuck you. I don't know you, but fuck you.
Brian Burgundy doesn't like Derek. I always like Derek.
There's only one
Bucket,
Derek,
right?
only one Derek I've ever liked, and that's number 2, the Captain Derek Jeter.
There was actually a kid named Derek who teased me in preschool. So fuck that
Hey.
Derek too.
Hey, Derek from preschool, fuck you too. That's
He doesn't have a wrestling podcast. For all you know, he does.
he might.
Ours is better.
Watch
That
Derek.
I'll say
Statistically
with
speaking,
confidence.
yeah.
Watch Derek from preschool is like a talent coordinator for WWE now, and I just threw myself out of a contract. Fuck.
No, they like it when you come right at them. You know, it's the guys that wait around and are nice that they never sign. That doesn't mean you should just be an asshole to them if you want to. It's a balance kind of thing. It's a balance kind of thing.
I was thinking about this the other day. Watch like I'll be on like the cusp of $1 million contract, and like you guys get me to say what I think about the current WWE product. So they'll be like,
Yeah.
all right, let's just do a background check on this guy, make sure everything's copacetic. They pull this up. It sucks for this, and this reason. Up and contract.
I have had ideas for episodes or miniseries shot down because people on this podcast still want to have a career in wrestling at some point. And
There is a line.
no, there is, and which I still will one day of my like on my own, unrelated to anybody, launch my podcast where I follow the crimes of the McMahon family in the hopes of putting all of them in jail. But I understand why other wrestlers wouldn't want to necessarily be.
We
part
tend
of that.
specifically not to talk shit about like current indie people who you might work with, Doc, at some point.
Yeah, like that's another thing. It's one thing to watch like historical tapes and criticize from the lens of history. It's another thing to talk shit on somebody who's current in the business that we might not know what's going on with them or what's going on with their promoters and what's not going on. Just what's not going on. If you want to hear people complain like they know what they're talking about current wrestlers, you can go on Twitter and read millions of people who don't know what they're talking about talk. It's the whole point of the app, I think. I'm one of those people. On Twitter, not on my podcast.
Exactly, but unless your name is Derek, then again, just fuck you. And I think we've killed that joke effectively.
That's what you do.
Now,
That's
on
what
the
they do.
topic of not knowing what's going on. So I knew that we had a guest today. But that's it. I'm sure Ben told me who the
I gave
guest
you a
was.
highlight reel.
Hold on. Getting to that. So I'm sure Ben told me at one point that we have, but I don't. That information was, my brain did not recognize it as valid, and so it was ejected from the Mind Palace. And
Toilet.
he put a message, and then that's how everything leaves the Mind Palace. That's how you forget things, is you shit out the memories. This is science.
I was saying it's not a palace. It's just a toilet.
Oh, just I have my Mind Palace looks like a toilet. That's the.
boy.
I mean,
Don't we all?
it's a palace-sized toilet. You can't just say that it's a toilet. It doesn't matter. Look,
Semantics.
it's not important. It's actually extremely important, but for this conversation, it's not important. So he then puts in the podcast Slack, Brian Burgundy episode, and then a list of matches. And I will be honest, I started watching these matches, being like, because I was just like, okay, like we're doing some wrestler named Brian Burgundy. I hadn't heard of Aaron Stevens when we started doing him. So I'm like watching this match between Shane McMahon and Kane, and I'm like, who's Brian Burgundy? When is he gonna show up? What am I waiting? And then like
that's an
RVD
interesting
shows
lens.
up, and I was like, is that like RVD's real name? Is this? Oh, are we doing an RVD episode? And that's what's going on. And then I like looked closer at the Slack message, and I saw at the end there was a Brian Burgundy highlight reel, and I was like, okay, so I'm gonna learn who this guy is at the end. And then about halfway through the second match, I pieced together Brian Burgundy is an indie wrestler that we're going to have on as a guest, and these are the matches that he has chosen for me to watch.
Yeah.
And so I was operating under different assumptions for a long time, and I felt like I should be open about that in the name of journalistic integrity.
Oh.
I think it's a very
Podcastalistic.
contesting wrestling thing, actually. And
Well,
I think
yes.
that's cool.
So
Oh, before we go any further, I quickly looked it up. Rob Van Dam's real name is Robert Alexander Zatkowski. So it's a fine name, but you can see why he didn't use it in show business.
Yeah.
I've also been involved in a site with Rob Van Dam in which I did not smoke because I'm a good boy. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't do anything except wrestle. So that's my vice.
If you're hurling yourself, like I will say, like I struggle with just been smoking too much weed for too long. Not the being high part, that still rules and is just great, but the a part where my lungs hurt and I'm like 37, that's not great. And I go up a hill in my neighbor. I live in the Bronx, so it's all just fucking hill. It's all hills. You can't walk on a straight path anywhere in the Bronx.
It's all uphill. Look, I when I go to the Bronx, it is the 161st Street Yankee Stadium. That's it. I get the fuck out of there. There's no other reason for me to be in the Bronx.
Might as well be Lisbon.
It is. Well, that's the thing. The hills there are. I mean, it's meant to keep people out. That's the idea. Is that. And yeah, Lisbon was a little slightly more brutal. The brief period of time I spent in Lisbon, but the point of that was that. I don't know how there are wrestlers who smoke a lot of weed, because I just the amount, like I said, I get winded going up this hill, and I work out a fair amount. Otherwise, I'm not in
Some of them smoke
shape,
cigarettes.
That's insane.
Which is really bad.
Well, you also do a ton of cardio. You do both of those all the time,
I remember seeing Jack Evans outside an ROH show smoking a cigarette, and I'm like, that guy? I mean, not that I doubt that he, did plenty of drugs. I assumed he did plenty of drugs. But cigarettes? Wow.
Hey, just looking at what Jack Evans does to himself, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
All right, so getting into the content
Oh, yeah.
that the wonderful content that Mr. Burgundy chose for us.
I do want to ask. It had been a while since I was present with a guest, but Brian, let me ask you: why should one spend time watching wrestling when one could do anything else with one's time?
Ask me that question now.
He did.
That's a.
It's currently now.
Currently now. Ask me that question now. I'd ask, why would you do that? That is a fucking terrible idea. But the other answer is when I was, and I figured this out. It's January 1st, 2004. I was flipping through the channels. I know the date because I remember what happened, and I went back and looked it up. But I was flipping through the channels, and for whatever reason, I get to Channel 9, UPN. Friday Night SmackDown, or Thursday Night SmackDown back then, starts. First thing I ever see, Rey Mysterio flies out from under the stage. There's a giant fist on the stage. There's pyro. There's thousands of screaming fans. Rey Mysterio, this dude in a mask, flying around the ring, beats Tajiri for the Cruiserweight title. As an 8-year-old child, of course, I become instantly hooked on wrestling. And I just fell into it, and I loved it. So what's kind of kept me in, for... how old am I now? 25. I was 8, so 13 years. I think I'm mathing right. What's kept me in?
Checks out.
17. I see.
I'll have my people look over it.
I've had a few. It all blends together and concussions and this and that. But what's kind of is it's when it's done right. When it is done right, it is the most beautiful form of storytelling. It is a real American sort of form, of art, in that when it's done right, you would just have thousands of screaming people going. It's just the emotion, drama. So when it's done well, it's the best. And that's the thing about professional wrestling. When it is done well, it is better than anything on the planet. And when it's not, it is not.
Well,
I can tell you.
It's a good way to put that.
Oh, a fun, look, I'm the really big deal as my character. So, high intensity 2028 was the last one we did, August of 2019. I had a 6-way match, and I came out for House of Glory. Yeah, I came out. I do my pose, whatnot. I have 3 of the other students run out, or I had 2 students carry me there on their shoulders. Another student ran out. I have a basketball hoop that you hang on your bedroom door, one of those tiny ones from Target for $30. I had another dude play defense, and I just took the tiny ball and I dunked over him, and the crowd went crazy. Like, where else are you going to get that sort of thing where a guy just fucking does that stupid dunk and thousands of people go, yeah!
Just like the immediacy of the emotional response
yes.
to what you're doing in the ring, right? You
That's
don't have
it.
to wait for critics or whatever to come out with their reactions.
I'm a huge storytelling fan. That's really the basis of my life. I'm a huge comic book guy, movies, entertainment, Star Wars, in music, I go to storytellers mostly, but like, I'm a huge metal guy. I don't think I go as deep as you guys into metal. But by the way, Godox still the
theme,
opening?
Indeed.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. First, I mean, I like it. I'm not huge into screaming 100%. I do like metalcore is my limit, like half scream, half sing. I don't know if this will be. I don't know if this will be an insult, but every time I hear that opening tone to that song, it brings me straight to "Scars" by Papa Roach. It's the same opening tone almost. I don't know if that's an insult to you guys.
You should hear the rest of the record.
It's not a compliment. Yeah, and I will say there, as the singer of Godox, it's not all screaming. So if you get a little farther,
good.
That song, when at the time of Godox's existence, that song was unusual in our catalog compared to the rest of the songs. I think it was the only song we had that was over like 70 beats per minute.
right, it's mostly really slow.
Yeah,
it's doom metal.
It's very heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Metallica, Linkin Park, Bruce Springsteen are my top 3, on any given day. So, and it just goes out from there. But
that fills the arenas, that's for sure.
Exactly, storytelling is just kind of what got me into everything that I'm into. And professional wrestling, again, when it's done at its best, it is the best storytelling that there is.
You ever get into Tom Waits?
I haven't gotten into Tom Waits.
I bet you would enjoy Tom Waits. I bet if you enjoy Bruce Springsteen and Metallica, he doesn't sound like
He's
a combination
of
but if you enjoy those things, you will probably at least enjoy like Mule Variations. And
he's quite a storyteller.
Yeah.
One of my things about Bruce Springsteen is like I'm not great with voices. I'm not a professional voice actor. I have one impression that I can do, but it's multiple people. Bruce Springsteen, Chad Kroeger, Eddie Vedder, they're all the same voice.
Yeah. It's the same voice to imitate.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's the same one.
It's funny hearing you talk about wrestling. Like, as strange as this is, I do kind of agree with you. Like, I do kind of agree with you that when wrestling is at its peak, it's like it's fantastic, and it's like, transcendent, even, and there it is this unique form of storytelling. And I guess I still just like my roadblock still after all this time is just that more than any other art form, the ratio of crap to good to stuff that's good, it makes it just seem not worth it to me to crawl through, because those transcendent moments, it seems to come at like every 1,000 hours of wrestling that exists in the world comes one of those moments.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's part of growing up. And well, first of all, when we were kids, when Doc and I were kids, there wasn't a whole lot of wrestling to go around. So, we were beggars in that way. Now, the older I get as a wrestling fan, in some ways, the less wrestling I watch. Like, I've learned what I don't have to watch. And I've learned how to sort of skip a lot of the crap, or just a lot of the work that to get to those great moments. And because they just keep making more wrestling. and
Do
it's
they?
not better.
No, just
That's
more
The volume is not an
content.
improvement.
They need content for their network, you know?
So I joined the House of Glory School in March 2015. So right up on 6 years training now. Holy shit. I started wrestling kind of regularly in December of 2016. So that just hit 4 years for me. And especially the more and more I got into the business train, like the less I watched and the less I was like, because every now and then there's good stuff and like I'll catch some paid reviews here and there or certain matches. And I do feel kind of bad because I like a lot of the people that are on signed and on TV today. I'm like, I want to watch you because it sounds like you're doing good stuff, but then I just watch it. I'm just fucking like, it's boring because it's either it's like it's average, mediocre, building to the good, or I just know. I'm a magician that knows the tricks now. I know how they pull the rabbit out of the hat. So now the entertaining part more for me is me pulling the rabbit out of the hat instead of watching somebody else do it.
Sure. Yeah. I think also as a fan, you develop a kind of obligation to certain performers who you like, and you want to see what happens to them in their career, whether they're doing something good with them or not. And you know, this goes along with some things that we've been talking about recently about how much wrestlers sacrifice, how much of their bodies and the rest of their life they have to sacrifice to do wrestling. And for me as a fan, it's like I have a lot of respect for that, and I feel like I owe it to them to watch what they're doing, since they're sacrificing so much in order to create it. Now, at a certain point, I just don't have time for everything that I feel that obligation towards. But, you know, it starts to whittle down to a few select performers who I feel like, well, they're the greatest in the world, and, you know, they have perfected their craft so well that they are owed an audience. And if no one else is going to watch them, I will.
It's also a huge nostalgia factor for what I watch. So I've known Ben for a little while now. We met on a street corner in Sunnyside, Queens. There was a beatboxer, a set of bongos, and illegal horse cart racing. I can't say anything else. It's still going through the legal channels, so I can't tell any more about how we met.
They get into that stuff in Queens.
Exactly.
Queens is a bigger place than people think it is, with all kinds of different stuff going on.
Horses fucking everywhere.
Fucking everywhere.
On every
Illegal
corner.
horse cart racing, bro. That's a bigger problem.
It's
than
a good
people
racket.
know. Good, yeah, yo, man. They got a don that's just raking in the money there. But so I was telling Ben. So I Ben followed me on Twitter 2 weeks ago. So I go, yeah, I'll follow back. And the top thing I see is the retweet from Contesting Wrestling. I'm like, what's this? Oh, he's on I didn't know he was on a podcast. So I started listening to it, and I instantly get in, and I do that thing like, when you hear other people talking about something that you really enjoy, you want to join in on the conversation. So that I screenshotted before I even finished the first episode. I screenshot my phone app. I send it to him. I'm like, I fucking love this. I want to be on it. Like,
Thanks so much, man.
and I can talk fucking for hours on end about this. I could be a permanent co-host for you guys. So that's a whole other story. But
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and I loved the idea, because just like there's fucking thousands of hours of professional wrestling being made now, there's thousands of professional wrestling podcasts.
Oh yeah.
So it was the one idea of like, I'm not a wrestling fan, my two friends are, and they're going to try to tell me why I should like it. And I do want to say,
this is why we won't let Evan go.
As a wrestling fan, I do want you to become a wrestling fan. More so, I want you to come to shows that I'm on and buy my T-shirts and pay me money at this point.
And I do like, yeah, we've talked before about how the timing of COVID was bad for many reasons.
Oh yes.
But like easily the seventh worst reason for the human race is that it made it so that it was impossible for me to go to a show, because that's obviously a huge part of the thing, of the experience that I'm missing, that may well change.
Yeah.
Like I said, the same way that, like, you know, when I'm watching wrestling in the morning and the whole time up until we start recording, I'm like, I hate this shit, this bullshit. And then I'm around you guys, I'm like, all right, obviously, you know, you've got an infectious joy. I don't want to feel like an asshole, so I'll try to dig it.
Yeah.
So maybe on a huge scale where I'm in a room full of screaming people who love it, maybe, that'll be a different thing. Like,
yeah.
I've
So
seen,
the
I
energy
don't
of it is a
like,
whole different thing.
when I was younger and I would go to punk shows, I do not care for punk rock. I am a square in that I'm a huge nerd who likes prog. But when you're 15 and you're in a fucking club with 100 other people who all fucking really love what's happening, it is hard to not feel that.
Well, I have nobody in my family is a wrestling fan. Nobody in my family is a wrestling fan, but they've come to shows to watch me, and they've just been like watching me wrestle. But they get into it. They're like, yeah, it's really fun to go. Mostly house-glory shows. They've come to smaller shows, which is like, you were good, everything else not so much. But and that's it. When they're live, it pops off.
And also, in general, they have a reason to already care about you.
Exactly.
Right? And care that you win.
But that's, You guys ever watched Smosh on YouTube? I've been watching some of it. They have some entertaining stuff, but they had a thing where one of the producers and then one of their former castmates are really into wrestling. So they took two of the cast members that weren't wrestling fans to the Royal Rumble in 2020, and they were literally set up. They were sitting right behind the announcers. So you see them on camera. So the two guys that weren't wrestling fans, they were doing a podcast with them, and they were talking about, like, we're not really big wrestling fans, but like, yeah, it was so much fun. They were going in here and there. And they were like, yeah, we were just cheering everybody. And then like somebody would come out and we cheer and they go, oh no, boo that person. We don't like that. But that's wrestling. Even if you don't like wrestling, if you're there at the show, you will get into the energy of the crowd. You'd be like, yeah, you're like, I don't know who that is. I don't know what's going on, but yeah.
Now, I think that infectious energy, mostly comes from the crowd. But I think it also very much comes from the creative team, the people who are making it happen. And when we're talking about like the modern WWE product, like when I've watched like stuff from the last couple years, outside of like some individual performers who are fantastic, like it seems so joyless. It seems so just like nobody fucking knows what they want this to be, anything. And I have to say, like, even though I do not have the wrestling nostalgia, like watching this first match I can see why a lot of wrestling fans think the Attitude Era was really the high point, because there is a real feeling of joy in the act of creating even though, like, you know what I mean? Like, there was just something, there's a crackle to what happened to stuff I've seen from like the 97 to 2003 era that is not really present in a lot of later stuff.
Part of that, wrestling's an interesting art form. Part of, especially recently, is smartphones and the diminishing attention span of fans, where if you don't do something to catch my interest right now, I'm going to do, look at my phone. I think it's taken a lot of weight.
So I was looking at my phone. Could you repeat all that?
Yeah, exactly.
They also, now they sort of encourage people to look at their phones, right? It's all, oh, I saw this thing. Let me now immediately post it somewhere.
Yeah,
on their pay-per-views now, they run a concurrent online show with a bunch of people not on the show, including some people like not in the WWE and a couple of indie wrestlers, where they're sitting there live reacting to the show. So you don't even have to do that yourself anymore. And if you'd rather pay attention to a room full of people watching the show instead of the show, you can. I mean, that's that. Yeah, I'm not even trying to put a value judgment on that, but they are taking the entirety of the experience and commodifying it. And that's kind of one of the things that takes the joy away. Like, there's a certain amount of commodification that is to be expected. Like when it came to like selling a bunch of merchandise, at some point, as what was known as like the Smart Mark fans started outweighing the non-Smart Mark fans, the WWE was like, well, okay, now what we just have to do is do a different kind of manipulation. But the different kind of manipulation doesn't work nearly as well as the original kind, which is like, well, let's make them feel things. The new kind is let's make them react a certain way. And there's a subtle difference between let's make people feel things and then they react some way because they feel it, and just purely let's have a Pavlovian response bunch of things that we're getting people to do.
What's crazy, like I get, like, you can go back and like watch a random episode of WCW Thunder from 2000. That's just the worst wrestling you could find, and you still get the crowds just going crazy, and like you can hear loud reactions because there's solely because it's 10,000 people in an arena, and the only thing they have to pay attention to is whatever the hell is happening in the ring.
Right.
Like,
something is happening in front of them. You know,
no matter, like a Kiwi WCW 2000.
Oh, Kiwi, yeah.
Kiwi, whatever. I wasn't watching in 2000. I never watched.
I was. Kiwi was over, man.
So
he was over. You know, you go to anybody now, and it's like, I don't know why he was over. He has no lasting legacy really at all. You know, not to talk shit about Kiwi, but he was
a weird character on a TV show that was big for a year or so, and then it folded and nobody used him.
What?
So, as Evan unsuccessfully tried to segue us back to the stuff we're talking about from this week, I will try again. But this is great. And I think this contrast is actually really important to bring out right at the beginning, because so what Evan is talking about is the first match we watched for today was Kane versus Shane McMahon from the 2003 Survivor Series. Now, 2003, Evan, it's a little bit after the Attitude Era, technically speaking, but it's the same. It's the same vibe.
It's the same. It's the same stuff. The only difference really between Ruthless Aggression Era and Attitude Era is about 2 million fewer people were watching.
Right. Yeah.
And
just afterwards.
And they were already kind of. They were already kind of scratching the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, half of the dick and tit jokes got replaced by actual wrestling.
Yeah,
once they
literally went corporate, once they actually did an IPO and had to please stockholders, they toned it down a little in certain ways. Obviously not too much, or we wouldn't be able to get the Kane versus Shane McMahon segment before the match.
Right, so the segment before the match is from the September 1st, 2003 episode of Raw.
I will tell you guys, I'll give you my whole thought process in why I selected the match that I did for the Kane versus Shane McMahon match. First of all, you guys have already covered basically my top list of choices. A lot of what I would have done ahead of this match, you guys have already talked about. All right. So then I was looking at my DVD collection, which obviously pre-WWE Network, a DVD collection existed. I was going through some of the stuff, and I just saw the Survivor Series 03 DVD. I was like, you know what, man? I like that event. And like, that was like maybe the first wrestling DVD that I had. So I've seen it over and over and over again. So there's certainly a nostalgia factor. But yeah, like Ruthless Aggression, that's just when I started watching wrestling. So it doesn't matter what Ruthless Aggression thing you put on, I'll watch it and love it. Just for pure nostalgia.
Reigns. Let's go.
Yes, I'll watch that just out of hate watching, which is nothing. We'll get in that with a bad match. But the good match,
let's go, Luther. No,
good match,
right.
Kane and Shane. I was like, you know what? I like that. It's enjoyable. I know Evan took his break from the podcast, so I was like, even if he doesn't like the match, it's Kane versus Shane in an ambulance match. He'll have some sort of opinion. I know he left because he was like, I have literally nothing else to say about this anymore. Like, it's just wrestling. I'm like, all right, he'll at least have some sort of opinion for this match, good or bad.
And then it was Doc who reminded me about the events leading up to the match, and particularly the testicle electrocution. Evan, I don't know if you noticed during the video package before the match, he also tombstoned Linda McMahon. Like 60-year-old Linda McMahon.
I feel like I remember you mentioning that at some point.
It's in the video package. I'll try to find a clip of it for you.
That's the kickoff of the feud. He tombstones Linda McMahon, so that gets Shane to come to Raw next week like, I'm going to beat the shit out of Kane. And the feud goes from there. That was like a couple weeks before SummerSlam. So at SummerSlam, they had separate matches, and then the night after they started their feud directly with the two of each other. But
so we did start with this Raw before Survivor Series and a few segments featuring Shane and the infamous car battery testicle electrocution. And Evan, this is both famous and infamous, as in everybody watched this segment and like they've replayed it a million times, but everybody also recognizes it's one of the most ridiculous things you could put on TV. What did you think of this? Let me hear your reactions.
I mean, I thought,
yeah.
All right, so a couple things. One, I have to say, Shane. I'm always entertained. If it is a bit involving Shane, I think he's incredibly committed. I think he always does well. I think it is because his father's like love and respect is completely bound up in like whether or not he performs well. So like in that way, it's like fucked up, right? That like the only reason Shane is good is because there's a hole inside of him where his father's love should be.
Yeah. A funny aside about that. So before the testicle electrocution, Vince comes up to Shane and is like, son, you know, whatever happens tonight, you know, I want to know that you forgive me. Like he asks him to forgive him. And in my head, I'm like, that's the closest that Vince has ever come to like actually being a real father to his son.
As far
and, like,
as
that
on
was
TV,
Shane's only chance, and he turns him down in TV.
Yeah.
Well, I
as
mean, in
far
real
as
life
on,
as well.
on TV, real life, that may have also been the only moment. We don't know them personally. I actually used to work with somebody that is from Stanford, and she was like, yeah, we kind of know Shane, and like he's kind of a dick, but like I don't know him personally, so I can't say it. With people like that, I think it's just kind of when you meet them situationally. They're not inherently bad people, but yeah.
I would like to go on the record, by the way, just as saying, in representing my views and my views alone, that I am sure Shane McMahon is a bad person in his everyday life. I'm sure he's less bad than the other McMahons because I feel like he also sort of knows like what it's like to be an outsider, but also maybe that just makes him more bitter. It's entirely possible. Once again,
just
these
go
are
all the
solely
way
my
with it.
views.
Just go all the way with it. He walks down the street, and if he sees a flock of pigeons, he pulls out a well-concealed 22 and just pops one in order to get them all to scatter instead of just walking through like a normal
I think
adult.
Stephanie's the one with the weird power shit like that.
Now,
Yeah,
Stephanie carries a much bigger gun.
That's
Stephanie pulls out the Magnum like, it's going to be a good day today, you know.
Now the one way that Shane is not fully committed, and this is literally the only thing in which he is not 100% committed to the bit, is whenever he starts doing the dance, the Rocky Johnson dance that he looks like he gives up about halfway through it. Like it always looks like he starts doing it and then he's like, I know I should.
Like guys, I watched 5 months worth of Kane and Shane McMahon programming, so I saw that dance a lot, and I loved it every single time. When he does it today, you know it's bad. Shane, you're a rich white boy from Stanford. You can't dance, but goddamn it, keep doing that dance.
That's right. This program kind of went on for like 5-6 months, didn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Jesus. We don't have to go over all of it. In fact, we've pointedly, one of the things to get Evan back on the show was instead of gigantic sweeping retrospectives, we're going to show a few clips in a match or two. So let's focus on what we've got today.
And the whole, you know, the electrocution is great. It's like they did a crucifixion again, but they were like, we're gonna turn it down a little bit.
Yeah, the look on Shane's face afterwards, as like a guy who has just been electrocuted through his testicles, is absolutely brilliant. And Rob Van Dam coming out and trying to save him.
I feel like there was like a good amount of attention to detail here. Like more than they usually do for something like this. It came off as like somewhat realistic that he might actually be electrocuting his
over the course of
testicles.
this feud. And I saw a few things that were like, going back to like nobody makes wrestling legal. I actually don't like it that much just because it's so inconsistent. If you're bringing lawsuits and police into wrestling, how come he's getting sued for this? Or so over the course of Kane's storyline,
it's not like this is the only scenario that would warrant intervention.
Over the course of Kane's storyline that summer, just real quickly, like he lights Jim Ross on fire, doesn't get arrested for that. Tombstone's Linda McMahon. No, he lights Jim Ross on fire. He gets placed under house arrest. So for about 4 weeks, every time he came to the arena, he was handcuffed and shackled with police escorting him around. tombstones under McMahon. Then there's the testicle electrocution. There's Kane literally at one point nearly killing Tommy Dreamer and Rico in a different segment, like just leaving them bloody messes. There's Shane McMahon luring Kane into a limousine, which he then drives, or he sticks a pipe on the accelerator so it drives into a tracker trailer, having Kane in the crash. So it's like
He throws him into that like he sets a fire in a dumpster and throws him into there as well.
Shane McMahon was in the hospital. They had a last minute standing match at Unforgiven. Shane jumped off the Titantron. Really cool spot. So the next night he's in the hospital. Kane goes to the hospital and beats the shit out of him, making him bleed, and like punches security guards, scares the shit out of nurses. No legal repercussions whatsoever.
Vince
for any
has
of
deep
that.
pockets.
Yeah.
And as
They
we
know
find
him at
out,
the local medical facilities across the country.
Vince was in league with Kane the entire time.
That was
There's a cool
I almost
subplot that's happening.
I thought about doing that for the bad match. Was the Undertaker Vince McMahon
the Buried Alive match
later on that show. The only reason I didn't do it is because I still like it, mostly because of nostalgia purposes, because it's the Undertaker beating the shit out of Vince McMahon for 20
I
minutes.
do remember that reveal being pretty shocking. Like they did a good they did a good job of us not thinking that Vince and Kane were in league. Throughout the whole feud.
And then there's another thing where there's a slight point where, like, after Linda was tombstone, Vince came out and he was gonna challenge Kane to a fight, and he was like, "But what if I had you on my side?" And then that's when Shane made his return and everything else. But not to bore Evan too much, we can move on.
I was just wondering. I was trying to do a little research here. Does anybody in wrestling practice the ancient art of kendo? Because you're seeing them smack each other with sticks all the time, and I'm like,
Blackman,
this goes back to like the fucking 1600s.
I think
If anyone, it was the what did he call him? The Lethal Weapon, Steve Blackman.
Yeah. I don't know if Steve Blackman practiced the ancient art of kendo, but Steve Blackman is an accomplished martial artist who eventually got out of wrestling and pursued just doing actual martial arts. Not even like MMA fighter. I believe he teaches.
The Sandman was definitely a kendo master, right?
I once upon a time at a show the day before my birthday, and I had a piñata death match. So I got empty boxes, wrapped them up. I got piñatas, filled them up with candies. I took Seymour canes, wrapped them up, and we used them. And it was really fun. And we need to talk nothing else about the rest of that show. But I had a piñata death match, which was great.
Nice.
Piñata.
All right, so speaking of gimmick matches, the actual match between Kane and Shane, the ambulance match.
Yes.
Evan, go ahead.
Oh, no, having an ambulance there is great. Driving an ambulance into other wrestlers is great. There's a moment later in the match when Kane is in the back of the ambulance and Shane gets in there, and, like, it's cheap. It's cheap to, like, laugh at the homoeroticism of wrestling, right? Like, obviously, it's just sort of built in there. There is a moment...
The "are they fucking" spot.
There is a moment where it really does look like it's almost like a shot in a romantic comedy, like when the two mains like finally hook up and you see their legs like sticking out of the thing while the camera slowly pans away, and it really looks like Shane like gets in there and then they start like getting busy while the camera just hangs on their feet, sort of like just outside the door.
Rather recently, I watched Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels in a casket match from Rumble '98, which is what hurt Shawn's back and put him out for 4 years. But there is a spot where they both go in the casket and the lid closes over the top of them. So there's some shaking, there's some fighting going on. You're like, well, that looks sus. That looks sus.
Which once again. Not only nothing wrong with it, but frankly, I would enjoy it so much more in wrestling if they would just dig into if they would just have like romance-oriented feuds and subplot.
There are promotions these days that dabble in that sort of thing.
Are you still a Shawn Michaels sexual? Is that still a thing?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. That'll never go away. That's there forever. I will say, to this date, the match that I found the most, I guess, fraught or intrigue, the match that was the heaviest with like character meaning and stuff was the Golden Lovers match. And because I was really shocked at how, and that is something I am consistently surprised by, like just how much the context of knowing what is going on in the match will, affect how you view what's going on. And perhaps that sounds obvious to wrestling fans, but it's new to me.
It's still new to me.
I've only been doing this like a year and a half. That watching Ibushi and Omega wrestle with that background of just like, this is like we are watching like the collapse of like a deep and meaningful romantic relationship, at least is the implication. I don't know, that was really profound and something extremely unexplored in wrestling. Not necessarily saying that Shane and Kane would have like been that intriguing of a couple, I'm just saying.
I mean, yeah. It would have been different than the Golden Lovers, that's for sure.
A quick aside about the Golden Lovers, since we don't get a lot of time to talk about current wrestling stuff. So AEW and New Japan have started to work together a little bit. Kenny Omega is the AEW champion. Kota Ibushi is the IWGP World Champion. If they actually do that match for both titles, it will be the greatest build to a match in the history of pro wrestling.
Over
like a decade, different promotions, different continents. Like, I don't think anything like that has ever happened before.
And both wrestlers, unlike other times that had the potential to happen, both wrestlers will still be quite in their primes, right at the peak of their careers. It's going to be hard if that match happens. The expectation, I don't think I'm too out of line saying, the expectation will be that it's the greatest match of all time, according to, people who like matches like the kind of matches they have.
Well,
I'll certainly watch it.
Interesting question I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Evan, as the self-professed not wrestling fan here, as someone who had to take a break for a while because fuck wrestling, and
I like how you brought back the self-professed thing there. By the way,
yeah,
that's how you do it, brother.
You say you're not a wrestling fan, but look at how much wrestling you want. Anyway, so what to you, as the one who's not engulfed by wrestling here, what to you makes a match good, and what makes a match bad?
All right. So there's a couple things. One is that in stark contrast to like all of the art forms that I do enjoy, I am not very analytical about wrestling, so I very much go on a like, am I enjoying this right now? Is what, like, I'm watching a thing on TV, am I feeling entertained? Yes or no. So part of it is that. I think I guess it's I guess like
one thing you've talked about before is like the dynamics of a match. Like, you didn't like Foley so much because you thought it was kind of flat, where it's like the same energy the whole way. Whereas you like things that have more peaks and valleys and stuff, which is sort of the traditional view, I think.
I guess this is gonna sound like perhaps overly high like standards for how fucking hard it is to do a wrestling match, but it's like, like I need something that like moves along at a good pace, has a nice range of stuff that happens in the match. Like I like to see some technical like holds and reversals and that kind of thing, a little bit of high flying stuff. If they're going to be strikes, I like them to be real looking. I like, or once again, like if it's like a comedy match or something like that, like that's great, but you have to lean into that part of it. Like, I'm really trying to think of I could list the things that I have found interesting about matches that I've enjoyed, but I don't know if I could articulate like a full vision of like what my perfect matches or what's something that I would really, because even the Ibushi Omega match, which I found was profoundly moved by, like went on a bit fucking long, and like really could have had some Omega in general. Like I really enjoy his work, but a lot of the stuff I've seen of his, like they could.
There was also Brian Kingston, which had a cool story leading into it.
Yeah,
that got involved with.
And that not only had a really good story, but I guess it was like watching a wrestler articulate their character like through their wrestling it's just, to me what makes like a good character, is the mark of how a wrestler does a character well. And I feel like just like Kofi Kingston does his thing so well, and then when Daniel Bryan was there in like full like true villain mode, where I feel like in that match in particular, he really carries himself like an evil surgeon, like who's just going in and like trying to like specifically target every part of Kofi Kingston that he thinks is weak and to like take him apart. And then watching this guy who is just like, just a guy who's just a really good dad who happens to be an unbelievably talented athlete kind of thing, like fighting against, I don't know, like that's the thing. I guess once there's enough stuff in there to keep me emotionally engaged and interested in stuff like that, then I'll be into it. It's a very long-winded answer.
And this comes with the criticism we were saying before about how there's no.
I'm only long-winded answers about wrestling, so.
But like we were talking about how there's just way too much content and everything is decompressed, so you get less and less stuff built into each moment, and it's a problem. Brian, you mentioned comic books too. It's a problem in comic books too. They just try to put out so much stuff and get people to buy more and more stuff that each individual instance of it has less quality and less value to it. And there's some movement against that as well. But the major comic book companies are very much guilty of that.
It is more buck for your bang in that there's a bunch of stuff, but it all means less and less. That's. Yeah.
Look at the difference between like a lot of like the quote unquote prestige TV in the age of streaming versus even stuff from like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, where there are so many shows that are like built to be, made to be binged, made to like, you just pound 8 episodes in a day, and so much less shit will happen in individual episodes, and each individual episode will be a lot less like meticulously constructed as a single thing, because in the before times, or even like once we were in the age of on demand, but it wasn't necessarily like the streaming, like just beam the feed into my brain directly for like 9 hours at a time. There was like an expectation of like, each episode has to be a thing that's good enough where I'm into it and I'm gonna come back next week.
Draw the viewer, keep the attention.
So what I enjoyed the most about this Shane McMahon-Kane match is just that it's balls to the wall from beginning to end. Shane immediately dives at Kane, knocks him completely upside down outside of the ring, and then they just beat the shit out of each other in creative ways for not a long time, like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, not too long.
Usually these kinds of hardcore matches are way drawn out and super long.
It's when they do the last man standing matches. That's what takes up the time. The whole waiting for the count and the knockout. No, this was not that. It wasn't exactly a sprint, but it was a lot closer to a sprint than a marathon. Shane went right for the putting Kane on the table and jumping off the top rope through it, because they had to do it then because they were leaving the ringside area after this.
So I watched it back, and I watched it somewhat recently in the background when I was hanging out with a few of my friends. So I didn't like watch it too, other than that, like I hadn't really watched it in a while. So like watching it back, I was like, this is way faster paced than I like kind of remember it. So like, I really like it. It was just a fast pace. It was like, I think the bell to bell time is like 13:47 or something like that. It's not even 14 minutes. And they just beat the shit out of each other. And they're in the ring for all of 2 seconds in this match. Kane gets dove on, it turns inside out, almost lands directly on his head outside the floor. Like he takes a straight down dive, and you don't see it with the camera, and I think he saves himself with his hands.
You see for like a split second he gets a hand out.
But it looks like he lands straight on his head. And then they go in the crowd, they go in the back, they fight, and they come out to the ambulance, and then you're done.
They do a couple of gimmicky dives with like cardboard boxes, which you have to do in this kind of WWE.
But I mean, look, man, jumping coast to coast off of the ambulance, I remember that when I watched it when I was young, and it's still just as fucking cool now.
And it's just like it's done this way where it's like these 5 or 6 like little segments, and They string it together nicely. It doesn't get repetitive. Each one is different from the previous one. They don't like at one point, like even like they're getting tired at the end. Like certainly,
It's
like they
understandable.
spend a lot. But it's like they do. I think the only moment there's a one point where Shane gives a kick that is like not he's like doesn't not really sell. I wrote it's at 48-12 minute 48-12 and he does this like I can't.
I think that's right before the coast to coast where he did the DDT on the concrete and then like he goes to set up the coast to coast. So as he's walking by, he just gives like a little like half punt to Kane.
Yeah.
Like I caught that. I was like, yeah, that's a little Shane McMahon for a guy who's legitimately trained in multiple forms of mixed martial arts, at least somewhat. I don't think he's master, but he's legitimately trained in.
He wasn't by then.
Yeah, not by then.
At
but
that
even
point,
now,
he had been shown how to wrestle a little by Pat Patterson, and that's about it.
Shane McMahon never got the art of working a strike to look good. Shane, for all the love of Shane, he's not great at kicks and punches.
Well, people say his punches hurt a lot. They just don't look good, which is the opposite of what you want in wrestling.
Wrestling, you're supposed to look like you're hurting each other, not
actually be hurting.
People have been doing the opposite, and then it happens in indie wrestling all the time. You actually beat the shit out of yourselves, and it looks terrible. Why?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kane hits the tombstone on the fucking concrete, and that's the end of the match.
Yeah.
Amazingly. Whereas nowadays, they would go another fucking 10 minutes with a bunch of unnecessary spots.
Yeah, a bunch of bullshit.
They just beat the shit out of each other for 13 minutes. Like, they go in the back. Also, now, Howard Finkel, before... I made sure to look this down, because Howard Finkel, before the match, announces you have to throw your opponent in the ambulance. But they played it loose. I guess you could have thrown your opponent in an ambulance, because they go in the back and Shane calls an entirely separate ambulance. I love that. Sticks out so much in my mind because first of all, Shane gets in an SUV, backs it up into Kane into a security box, and Shane doesn't care about Kane's well-being when he backs an SUV into him. Shane doesn't even. This is how much Shane hates Kane, because the entire feud was supposed to be like Kane driving Shane McMahon to a point of he has no compassion. He has no heart. Like, he's trying to be as sick as Kane, and he gets in this SUV to hit Kane, and he doesn't put a seatbelt on. So he doesn't care about his own well-being. Definitely doesn't care about Kane's.
That's great.
But then he gets a walkie-talkie, and just this line just sticks out of my head. I love it. Send it! Send it!
Also, can I just say it's a real misuse of city emergency resources. Just like, if there was a disaster that happened,
because of this match.
Yeah, they'd be down 2 ambulances. That's big, especially if you're like, I don't know what city where they were, but like depending on the city, that could be a lot.
They were in Dallas, and actually after this match, Mark Cuban got RKO'd by Randy Orton. Yeah, that's a thing that happened on this pay-per-view. But yeah,
right now, Dallas would, if they were down 2 ambulances, they'd be fucked as of the recording. Like,
well, they need all the resources they've got.
Yeah, well, there was actually at several points, like I mentioned, Kane was being accompanied by cops throughout the summer. Like, there's one point where there are multiple points where Eric Bischoff is yelling at the cops like they work for him, and I'm just like, why would a cop not instantly be like, I'm a cop, you're just some random wrestling guy through the day. You're not my boss. Like, you don't tell me what to do with my prisoner. But yeah, that was that's a waste of resources, assigning 25 cops to look at one wrestler. But that's a whole other story. Bringing it back to Ben's point from early in the podcast of the pile driver being the move that goes, I do not care about your well-being. This is Kane has pile driven a mother, a 75-year-old, well, at the time she was only like 50-something, but 50-something-year-old woman on top of a steel stage, and then tombstone pile driving her son on just the concrete floor before tossing him in an ambulance, which also, like, I really liked how they used the ambulance in this match, just from throwing Shane onto the windshield and cracking it, or Shane just like taking the door and just smashing it into Kane's face.
Yeah.
I really liked how they used the ambulance as a weapon.
There you go.
To date, Kane has tombstoned over 8 city council members in Knoxville. It's fucked up.
That's it, man.
And Pete
Mayor
Rose
Kane
several times.
and
Yes.
Pete Rose, Mayor Kane, man. That's
Mayor
that is
Kane.
that's a great
Right.
that is a great.
Yeah, I don't really want to get into Kane's
I don't want to
politics.
get into. I don't want to get into barricade.
I did Google it before we started recording just to see if like Kane had also like fucked anything up really horribly or had released any statements like you remember you read that the one Texas mayor who literally, this is gonna sound like I'm making a joke.
I know what you're talking about.
But
Yeah.
the one who literally said like, look, just because you pay money to the power company doesn't mean they owe you power.
Right.
Oh yeah, that
The government isn't. It's not the government's responsibility to be here for you during some sort of a natural disaster.
Yeah, especially if you're paying them for it.
Yeah, he resigned. I think like 2 days later. That schlub and
Yeah.
the other schlub, Senator Spineless.
Oh, he's not going to
Yeah,
run
right.
for re-election.
Oh,
Really?
thank
Oh, good.
God! I've just been waiting for them to get him.
I'm reasonably sure somebody broke into their house, and that's just not being widely reported. But because the second it came out that he was in Texas, I saw a lot of people on Twitter in Texas being like, "So that means Ted Cruz's house is empty right now." And like I saw like a lot of people
That's pretty
tweeting
good.
that, and I'm like, someone in Texas is going to be pissed off enough to act on that because there's some grim shit happening there right now.
Oh, there was. I shared it on Facebook. I had to find it, but there was somebody put out a tweet that was like, watch Ted Cruz blame his wife and daughters. Like, watch him throw them under the bus, and then he throws his daughters under the bus. Yeah, and then and the response was just like for everyone praising me for my Nostradamus like predictions here. I just figured, what would I do if I was a spineless piece of shit? And that's what happened. So to give you my bad match philosophy here, I love bad wrestling when it's bad. Like, I don't like bland, boring bad wrestling where it's just I want to see actively bad wrestling. I love watching that now. So I needed a match just to really. So I'm like, all right, I need a match where it's first of all easily accessible for you guys to watch, and it's either got to just be filled with shitty moves and botches, which is relatively harder to find in an easily accessible platform. Like, I could have just found like, in order to find like at least at the professional levels, there's it's not all botched. Like, I tried finding like some Divas match from 2002. I was like, oh, these are actually not bad.
Yeah, they trained.
Oh, but yeah, the other thing I would have to do is just find a random indie match with two schlubs, and nobody wants to hear shit on two indie guys.
No,
so the other one,
they're trying.
Yeah, the other process would have just been, I wanted to find the most what the fuck did I just watch match that I could. And I don't know if I found the most what the fuck did I just watch matches ever, but I found one of them in the King of the Ring 2000, Pat Patterson versus Gerald Brisco in a hardcore evening gown match. I Googled
for the hardcore title.
I Googled bad wrestling matches. I was trying to find the worst of the worst, and I came across that. So I messaged them like, have you guys talked about this yet? No? Good. Lock it in. This is what we're doing.
It is fascinating how wrestling, is what it is 95% of the time, where it'll just be like, oh, hey, we're going to have this, like, this thing where two guys are going to sort of pretend to fight, but sort of really fight, and it's a whole thing. It has this whole history, and there'll be sometimes caricatures or stereotypes or whatever trying to reach into your mind and play on some primal things, but for the most part, it's a pretty cut and dry thing. And then every once in a while, wrestling's like, oh, real quick, we're also just going to quickly expose ourselves as like the naked psychosexual in darkness in the fucking deepest corners of the psyche of the guy who's booking this particular show.
So
Yeah,
much like
for years that
One
Booker was Pat
particular
Patterson.
psyche.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And like,
right, sure.
and once again, not to just be like, oh, like it's because they had like the two guys dress up like ladies and fight each other, but the depths of the like everything, like the shoving the banana in the guy's mouth, the like although I have to credit where credit is due. I had a real laugh once in this match. It was very early. It was before any actual wrestling started. And it is one of the guys comes out to Hulk Hogan's theme song.
Oh, yeah, Gerald Brisco.
Yeah.
Real American.
And
They were
Brisco-
full on fuck Hogan at this point. So why not? Gerald Brisco has a great
and he comes
sense of
out
humor.
and he's dressed like a woman. He has these giant fake breasts. And one of the announcers goes, "Are those real?" And the other guy goes, "Yeah, he's a real American."
That's pretty
That's
good.
funny. That is a funny joke.
much like Kane and Shane, I watched 5 months of I didn't watch. I did not watch this.
No, see, okay, this is actually the Attitude Era, which means they didn't do 5 months worth of angles. They did a couple of segments for a few weeks to build up to this, which was not a focused on match, but it was a bit of a sideshow attraction in the middle of all of this.
I watched the segments. I watched the segments from the week before. I watched the segments with them from Raw and SmackDown that set up this match.
And the one of them, speaking of Hulk Hogan, how Patterson won the title, where he pours the champagne on Brisco.
That's a Hogan reference.
I didn't even think about
that's
that.
a reference to when Hogan won the title for the first time, and Andre the Giant poured the champagne.
I didn't even think about that. A little side note. So it's Crash Holly versus Hardcore is when the Hardcore title had the 24/7 rule. So they come out, fuck with the Hollies. Gerald Brisco wins the title, and they play Real American. Which look, Terry Bollea, not a good person, horrible person. But Hulk Hogan, god damn it, when that song comes on, and Hulk Hogan is the ring, I'll be damned if I don't start flexing and ripping my shirt.
If you've never seeing it live, it's a feel you can't describe.
That's
it.
the merchandising genius, because then you have to go and buy a new shirt.
This past July 4th, I was in the gym and I had my playlist on shuffle, and Real American came on, and I was like, God damn it, this is one of the greatest workout songs of all time.
But, and don't forget, we always have to point out, Terry Bollea does not have a 10-inch penis.
Hey, there's a
Hulk
reason.
Hogan.
There's a reason Brian Burgundy's called the really big deal. So they play Hogan's music
It's
on
your
Raw.
big pair of sunglasses.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's the.
Yeah, to be clear, Hulk Hogan has a 10-inch penis. Right. Terry Bollea was used as a pawn by a billionaire to smash an independent media company that he didn't like.
Right.
Just to make
Okay.
that.
So Brisco wins the Hardcore title on Raw. They play the music, and JR goes, and now we have to listen to this atrocious music.
Right.
Hulk Hogan.
The funny thing about the wrestling in this match is that when these guys were younger, they were two of the best wrestlers in the world. Pat Patterson is one of the greatest wrestling minds in the history of wrestling, and when he was the first Intercontinental Champion in the early 70s,
Booked the Royal
79.
Rumble. For
70,
most
oh
of
yeah.
its existence.
In the early 70s, he was still wrestling in San Francisco, drawing huge crowds every week. And
so, in wanting to find so I had recently watched the Pat Patterson documentary on the WWE Network, which is a solid 60-minute documentary. Pat Patterson, they have stock footage of him talking about his career. It's good. It's a good watch. So I went through that, and then in wanting to find the most what the fuck did I just watch match possible, I came across two men at the time. Brisco was like 55, Patterson was 59. They were two of the best technical wrestlers of the 70s. Brisco and his brother, great tag team champions all over. Patterson won titles all over, was like the quintessential star in the San Francisco territory. Team of the race, the first Intercontinental Champion, and the two of the most respected behind-the-scenes minds, talent scouts, bookers, whatever. So, just two men in their mid-50s, dressed in drag, having a hardcore match with maxi pads, bananas, stuffed bras, pumps.
I gotta say about the drag. They both really fucking own the outfits.
oh yeah,
Like they both look fantastic.
So I
Brisco
watched
in his heels and like flexing in his like makeup and stuff. I don't know. I think he
So-
looks cool.
Patterson is more
And
committed
I
to
appreciate
looking like
a good drag show.
Yes, Patterson is more committed to looking like a man in drag who's like
Right,
really. Whereas like Briscoe's actually kind of got it going on just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
Right,
there's like
exactly.
some elf,
Yeah,
there's some actual MILF energy happening. Like
So I watched early in the pay-per-view, Pat Patterson, they have him in his locker room and he's going through different things to wear and he's talking to, I guess, a stylist, and he's
Yeah.
like, oh, I can't wear this, like I would look terrible, like this looks like something my mom would wear. I have to, like, if I'm gonna dress like a lady, I have to be the best, whatever he's saying. It's fucking I quoted him, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it right. Let's see, size 6 would be perfect. I've got to look better than Briscoe. I'm the champ. Those are quotes from that
Now,
segment.
and you know, like a lot of this is playing on the fact that it was sort of a unkept secret, a badly kept secret,
an open secret.
Patterson
I
was
think
gay.
is the word
An
you're
open
looking for.
secret.
Yeah.
Yeah, for years and years and years that Patterson is gay, and
Decades.
eventually he did come out officially. So they're definitely playing on that, where it's like, oh, he likes to do this.
Oh, he was having
Yeah,
a ball.
And
For
I
our
think
younger-
I believed it. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel
He
like
was having a
maybe
ball.
he's done this sort of thing before.
for our younger listeners who might be unaware with the forms that homophobia and transphobia took pre like 2012 or something like that, the perception that I grew up with, for example, of like trans women was that they were gay men who just were so gay they somehow went through to the other side.
And
I
that's,
think that was the predominant.
and that's, you lived in one of the
perception.
most gay neighborhoods in America.
I
too.
grew
So you were
up in the
exposed
village in
very
the
well.
90s, and I still
Yeah.
had. Well, that shows how deep transphobia is. In this society,
in
but-
the underground like theaters and so on, where they would have drag shows in the 80s and 90s in New York, they wouldn't do stuff that far off from what you see here.
no.
Yeah.
And obviously, and like drag is obviously, it's a different. I'm not necessarily trying to conflate all of those things. I'm just saying that from the perception of why this was supposed to be funny, and like the jokes that the dudes are making, this I just, it's just an important thing to keep in mind. It might, like, that's why I think, to me, like, that's a big part of where the association came from of like I don't think the association of gay men dressing up like women came from drag. I think that drag came from the fact that for years people just assumed, oh, if you're gay, you must also like to dress up like a woman, and then this performance tradition sort of evolved out of that.
So, I mean, this match was literally booked on SmackDown because they were rolling around in drag. So Vince McMahon walks up like, what the fuck are you two doing? You know what? Sunday you guys are going to have a hardcore evening gala match.
The story
this match is clearly
specifically
just booked.
The story
It's
specifically
clearly
is that
just-
Patterson was dressing as a woman to hide from Briscoe, so that he couldn't come and
Briscoe
take
was hiding.
revenge for beating him for the hardcore
okay.
title. So he was hiding like in the women's locker room. So Briscoe thought, well, I got to dress as a woman to get in there so I can get Pat and get my belt back.
There was a segment where Briscoe was dressed up, so he goes to get the referee to like come follow me so I can win the hardcore title, and the ref's just laughing at him. He's like, "What are you laughing at?" And like there was another interview with Briscoe on the pay-per-view where he's talking to Jonathan Coachman, who's laughing. He's like, "This is funny," and then they have some intern shows up. He's like, "Mr. Briscoe, your dress and pumps are here." There was.
He asks if he wants
Yeah.
crotch full or
That was
crotch
it.
less.
He wanted
panties.
crotchless, yes.
Panties.
I was laughing because like this match is clearly booked just because Vince McMahon thinks it's funny. I was actually laughing just the stupidity and the ridiculousness of it, and like there's a line where Patterson's on the floor before the match and he's just like jeering Briscoe. He's like, "Look at you! You look like an old drag queen." Like that is literally what he is. For all of Vince McMahon's shortcomings, and they show in the Patterson documentary, like they show Vince McMahon talking about Patterson coming out, and he's like, "Okay, great, we all knew that." So like for all of Vince McMahon's shortcomings and like the sometimes subtle, sometimes blatant racism, homophobia, sexism, at least Vince McMahon generally seems like none of those things are his actual like thought process, but he will exploit the fuck out of it. He's like, "I don't care if you're gay, black, or a woman, but I will certainly exploit the fuck out of stereotypes on TV.
It's sort of how it was. I think it's how it was with Trump too. It's like, it's not like he's obviously bigoted in various ways, but the real problem was he was willing to exploit any bigotry for his own political gain.
That's the ultimate morality of the capitalist, is just like, if I can profit, if I can take the surplus value created by your labor, I don't care who you are as a person.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like, as long as you're not going to form some sort of a union and I can claim legal right to your name.
Well, so
this was also Crash Holly's thought process at the end of the match when he ran in, stripped them both, and then won back his hardcore title and ran away.
Much like the 24/7 title today, it was just open to anyone coming and trying to take it at any time.
Which, had some legitimately entertaining moments, and then, just got driven to the ground. But also interesting that you brought up the Orange. There was a highlight video. So this pay-per-view was in Boston. The night before, they had an MSG house show, and they showed a highlight video where Jerry Lawler was interviewing the Orange, who I will not name, but we all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then him and JR are talking, and Lawler goes, he shouldn't run for president of the U.S. He should run for king of New York. And man, in June 2000, that comment did not age well.
No. It wasn't good at the time.
It wasn't good back. And that was also, you were at WrestleMania 20. They did that shit again with Jesse Ventura talking to the Orange like, hey, how about you be my vice president in 2008?
Well, it was a joke up until it happened.
All right, so we have about a minute here. Evan,
all right.
We need to show you something that Brian pointed out that we had overlooked.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
In our covering of Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle from WrestleMania 21. And hopefully this is the right clip.
Oh, this is Kurt Angle's pretending to be Shawn Michaels.
They got Sherry out, It was her last appearance, I think, for them.
She went into the Hall of Fame the next year.
Okay.
But, that was it.
Well, even though this video only has 8 pixels, it's pretty great.
Well,
I would like to. All right, I will watch this again. I will have to. I think we just did Angle too close to like my burnout point.
That's fair.
And I just maybe didn't process like the last 15, 20 matches we watched before I took a break.
For the listening audience, because this is not a visual platform, we're playing the sexy Kurt Angle. Yeah, right. Funny.
I did my hair for nothing.
I'm just a sexy Kurt. I'll make your ankle hurt.
Hey, you guys did your the Shawn Kurt match, and you guys talked about the fact that Sensational Sherry sang Shawn's theme song, and then nobody brought up the sexy Kurt Angle, where Kurt Angle parodies it with the greatest dancing and the great lyrics, and it's just I watched it today and I was laughing. It was
great.
There we go.
Right. Well, on that note, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Brian,
thank you so much
for being on the show.
Good
we
stuff.
will definitely
really
have you back.
Again,
you were interested in maybe doing a Nigel McGuinness episode at some point.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned, you are a Dungeons & Dragons player, so if we end up doing that episode on the WWF adventure game.
I want to do that so bad.
We'd like to have you along for that.
I will come back whenever you guys want me. I could talk about wrestling for days.
I'm sure.
I saw so many bad wrestling matches popped across my screen. I'm like, that'd be fun to talk about.
Awesome.
Well, thanks very much for coming.
Yeah, man.
Well,
this is great.
Thanks for having me. So, I mean, I guess this is the part where I schlub my shit.
Oh, yeah.
So, Twitter at RB3 Burgundy. That's RB the number 3, BURGUNDY. Instagram's the same thing at RB3 Burgundy. You can go over to Facebook, Really Big Brian Burgundy. Hit that like button.
And it's SWF Live.
And
SWF upcoming bookings.
SWF Live, March 27th in Colts Neck, New Jersey, and April's after that also in Colts Neck, New Jersey, and there will be three like mini shows in one day. SWF's now part of the trifecta, so there's 3. We're doing like 3 hour-and-a-half or 2 hour shows over the course of one day in May. So
nice.
March 27th, if Zombie King doesn't duck me again and run away like he did the last time, he didn't even bother showing up for our last scheduled title match. I shouldn't even be having this match because I should already be the Cruiserweight champion. But if he shows up, I'm going.
Well, I thought you said you were the Cruiserweight champion.
I am, but SWF management refuses to recognize that fact, and management. This is
you and early '94 Shawn Michaels.
Me and early '94 Shawn Michaels, except I didn't get beat up by a bunch of Marines because I mouthed off in a bar.
There you go. You should find whoever runs that league and hook up their nuts to a car battery. It seems to work.
If apparently there's no legal repercussions.
Not in the confines of wrestling.
Also, a quick side note. So the Go Home show for the Survivor Series, Shane McMahon invited Kane to a restaurant to have dinner with him. So they have a conversation. Like, it's a real somber, it's a real, it's a cordial, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. I'm going to beat the crap out of you. And Kane goes, you know why I electrocuted you? Because I never wanted you to have kids, which would have been effective if Shane McMahon's wife wasn't already pregnant at the time of testicle execution.
If it was actually the Attitude Era, they wouldn't have wasted time with that. Before we get going, I wanted to plug our Patreon because this is a main feed episode. You go to patreon.com/contesting wrestling. We have 2 tiers. We have a $1 tier, which is just a thank you, and we have a $5 tier. And at the $5 tier, you get another episode of Contesting Wrestling every single week. We've been putting one out this whole time. By the time this episode comes out, there should be 71 premium episodes available. You get access to every one of those, and we put as much into those as we do these. So if you do enjoy Contesting Wrestling, if you
count the movie episodes.
Yeah, we also, we kind of loosen up a little bit more on those episodes too. So if you really like all of us, we have a bit of a rotating cast of characters now. Come on down to patreon.com/contesting wrestling, pledge you $5, and we will give you hours upon hours of more listening entertainment. Thank you.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you. We love you. Yes, give us money. We love you more than your money, but we also love your money.